Welcome everyone to the final episode of Season 2 of the World of Employment Law. I'm Tina Chander and I'm the Head of Employment at Wright Hassell. And I'm going to deliver this podcast by myself today. In Series 2, as you all know, we've done a number of episodes and my colleagues in my team have worked together to deliver really good episodes to you all. So we had an overview of the recent changes to family-friendly leave as episode 1. We then looked at carers leave in episode 2. We looked at parental leave in episode 3. And we looked at maternity leave rights and pay in episode 4. So the theme of season 2 was all about family-friendly leaves. And I want to bring season 2 to a conclusion, just rounding up on the themes that we've talked about and also what to do if things don't go quite to plan. And that happens, okay? So we need to just finish season 2 with a little action plan so everyone knows how to deal with a problem. Now, ultimately, as you've learned through season 2, family-friendly leaves is going to continue growing, and rightly so, because for a successful workforce, we have to be open to people's personal lives and the events that occur in individuals' lives, which require time off. We also have to ensure that those that need time off or are allowed time off because the law permits it, for example, maternity leave and parental leave, that they don't suffer any sort of detriment because, one, that's simply unkind, but two, the law doesn't allow you to make anyone feel that they should suffer any sort of less favourable treatment because of any particular leave that they've taken. The trick is, and I hope I've been able to get this across with my colleagues in season 2, is to ensure that your staff are aware of what all the different family-friendly leaves are, how to apply, and what the criteria is. Very often, as an employment lawyer, we are asked to draft policies that reflect changes in legislation and different leaves. And that's all good. But what's really important is that if you are in a HR function or you're a manager, then you have familiarised yourself with the changes that have happened in legislation, but also you've told your staff that these sorts of leaves are available. Unfortunately, and this happens, employers don't always get it right, and employees don't always go through the correct process to request the leave that they want. The starting point, from my perspective, is to always try, if possible, deal with any concerns raised by an employee as to their rights for leave in an informal manner. Yes, the law provides processes which should be followed, but if an employee is unhappy, ultimately, it's open to that employee to raise a formal grievance. But where possible, I would encourage informal discussions because there might simply be some miscommunication between employer and employee or a lack of understanding as to how an employee can obtain a certain entitlement. However, if the issues can't be resolved on an informal basis, then ultimately employees can raise a grievance, and a grievance is a form of complaint. And then the employer will be required to follow the grievance process. And that involves investigating the employee's concern and delivering an outcome. If the concern relates the application of family-friendly leave or lack of, or the concern relates less favourable treatment, it's really important that those considerations are taken seriously because ultimately employees can present tribunal claims. And this is something that the employer should want to avoid because of reputational risk, management time, and also costs. And if you have got it wrong and you haven't applied the law correctly, and you haven't allowed the leave correctly, or an employee has evidently suffered less favourable treatment, it's far easier for the employer to address that whilst the employee is in employment than deal with it as a tribunal claim. Lots of employees will feel isolated when they are raising grievances, and that's something to also be mindful of. But ultimately, what I am aware of in my role as an employment lawyer, when it comes to family-friendly leaves, it's prescribed. The information is available. It's available on the internet. It should be available in the policy. So any deviation of a fair process is likely to result in the employee's grievance being upheld. So my advice is know your policies. If you don't have them, employer, get some in place, please. If you don't quite understand how certain leaves are applied and criteria, then speak to your HR team or even an external lawyer. But know your information first. So that will very much hopefully stop a situation where you do receive a grievance and you're having to deal with that. In terms of where we are today, ultimately, employees do want flexibility in their work. And I started this podcast advising that, in my view, I very much believe that family-friendly leaves will continue to increase. So what's really important is that you remain alert to changes. Regardless of changes in government, family-friendly leaves is something that is going to continue to improve. And therefore, any employer that's not on board with family-friendly leaves is likely to fall foul of the law. What I don't want to do in this podcast is leave on a negative. That's not my intention. But what I really wanted to make sure that I get across today in this podcast is that things can go wrong, but they can also be resolved. I hope everyone has enjoyed season 2. We've given you a lot of information regarding all the different leaves that are available. Please do revisit those episodes again if you want to check in and just get those leaves right. Remember to have your policies, and employees that are listening to this podcast, you do have rights. Your starting point should be to look at what policy is in place by your employer and speak to your HR team. But employers and employees that are listening to this podcast, thank you very much for joining us in season 2. Please do seek advice if you are unclear on any aspect of family-friendly leave. Thanks very much, everyone.